Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is our weekly pulse check, taking a look at what's hopping in the news with regard to automation and, of course, AI. So, Michael, let's dive right in. We've got 5 articles to cover today. So we got to get busy. Article number 1 comes to us from Yahoo Finance, and it reads, AI startup CoreWeave files for 2025's first big tech IPO. And it revealed that it gets more than half of its $1.9 billion in revenue from a single customer. So, Michael, who is that single customer?
That'd be Microsoft. They account for 62% of CoreWeave's revenue in 2024, which is interesting that with such a high spend rate that Microsoft wouldn't consider an acquisition there, if in fact they're spending so much with CoreWeave.
Yeah.
But I think this definitely highlights some potential flaws as they're doing their IPO. The customers are using it, I'm sure, are very happy, and this is a good thing. But as an investor, I would find that to be terrifying to know that Microsoft, who has a boatload of their own data centers and capabilities from an AI perspective, could theoretically just decide that tomorrow they won't be using CoreWeave services anymore. So that's a big challenge. But what's interesting is part of the way they filed for this is they talked about their infrastructure they have, where they've got hundreds of thousands of these NVIDIA chips that they're using, 250,000 GPUs that they're using within their data centers. That's a lot. That's a whole lot. And that's wonderful that they have this infrastructure and whatnot. But this also highlights the fact that their finances, if you look at that from an ongoing business perspective, as much money as they're pulling in from Microsoft, they have a $163 million net loss for 2024, up from a net loss of almost $600 million in 2023. So, I mean, they're bleeding money in a very, very wild way here. So while they may have their revenues of 1.9 billion, which are up a lot because of Microsoft spend, it's great that you're pulling in more money, but if you're bleeding it all out, I'm not sure how long you can make that happen. So not sure this would be a great investment. So we don't give investment advice on this show, but if I were to give investment advice that anyone would follow, I would say, look carefully at this before you put $1 into it.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting also about their history. So they were founded in 2017, originally as a crypto mining company. And they started reading the tea leaves. They saw this increasing demand for data centers and for all the AI models that needed to be trained. And so they had a hard pivot only 2 years after their founding in 2019. And now their tagline is CoreWeave is the AI hyperscaler. I love that. You mentioned Microsoft is their big customer. They are backed by Cisco and NVIDIA. And they're targeting, with their IPO, a $35 billion valuation, which is also fascinating given their financial performance to date, as you mentioned, and the fact that they only have like 1,000 employees. So 1,000-person company that's looking to have a $35 billion valuation from the get-go. That's pretty staggering.
It is. And I mean, this gets back to the whole funny business on numbers and what they're making now versus their potential future value and that sort of thing. Make that transition from Bitcoin mining at that time. Bitcoin is one of those things where it goes up and it goes down. And when you're heading down and when you have the splits and you have these different activities that are happening within the crypto mining space, it was natural for them to make that pivot when things were down. The other thing too is it's not necessarily as profitable anymore to do the crypto mining as it once was. So they had to find a way to put all that hardware to use. So it's interesting they have the backing of NVIDIA, which I'm sure is very happy to have a small portion of their equity there.
Yeah.
But they also buy a lot of stuff from NVIDIA. So I'm sure they're very happy to accept that money as well.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, second article from Futurism. It's titled OpenAI admits that its new model still hallucinates more than a third of the time. So yes, OpenAI has admitted that its new large language model spews fabrications about 37% of the time. But guess what? That's good news, because
it is so good
they've
news.
Also admitted that their previous model, GPT-4o, which has advanced reasoning, mind you, it hallucinates 68% of the time, and the O3 Mini hallucinates 80% of the time. What is going on, Michael? Please.
Well, it's always a matter of context. So, hey, it sounds terrible, but it's not as terrible as it used to be. So maybe we can apply this to our previous, story here that, hey, we're losing money, and we're losing money faster, but it may get better. We may be losing even faster, but we're growing. We're in growth mode. So stick with us. This is a way to spin some potentially bad news as they're doing this. Making improvements in the hallucinations for AI. This has been a huge issue with all of generative AI, is the way that it hallucinates. Making improvements is a stride in the right direction. But to your point, this still emphasizes the fact that corporate environments looking to use this on an enterprise scale really have to have some serious governance guardrails in place to ensure that they're not passing those hallucinations on as fact to their customers, to their shareholders, to their internal employees, basing decisions on those hallucinations and whatnot. It's good news that it's getting better, but it still reflects the fact that there's a long way to go to really get these to a point where people can, count on them.
To me, this is problematic for those use cases for Gen AI that seem to be very prominent, like research, responding to customer inquiries, analyzing data, basically any situation where truth is essential. It has to be accurate. It can't use creativity. Now, there are many cases where Gen AI creativity is valued.
It's treasured. Yeah.
We used it for a lot of that, right? What's a better way to word this? What's a better slogan?
Music generation, and there's a lot of interesting things that can come out of it when it uses its hallucinatory powers.
But for every one of those, there's 10 cases where it's got to be real. It's got to be factual. Yeah. So I agree with everything you said about governance. I think also there's something to be read into the agentic AI conversation, because again, we're talking AI agents that are self-directed and develop their own path and leverage large language models on occasion to determine what they're going to do. If they're doing that based on a hallucination, that can be pretty bad. So we've got to rein that in. Well, we've got another article on hallucination, so let's dive into that. We have to double up these days.
Absolutely.
The next one's from 404 Media, and it's titled "Judges Are Fed Up with Lawyers Using AI That Hallucinate Court Cases." So this article tells the tale of some attorneys in recent history that have cited cases that do not actually exist. They got them from large language models. Now, some judges are actually fighting back. They're actually applying fines or sanctions, as they call them, pretty stiff ones at that. So sort it out for us, Michael.
Yeah. So last fall, this attorney decided that he would file a brief that had a number of citations that were, as you mentioned earlier, hallucinations. They were made up. And what's interesting about all this generative AI is it makes it sound very, very believable. So these hallucinations were very thoughtful in how they supported the case that he was making. Unfortunately, because the citations weren't actually real, the judge had a problem with that. So he did fine him $15,000 to maybe go back and think about how he's been doing this, his research. And I guess they found out that he had done this a couple other times on other briefs that he had filed as well. So this is something that, there's a potential where this could do some fantastic work. You talk about the research. We just mentioned that. There is real benefit in this. However, there always going to have to be some kind of backing of real truth. Like, does this exist?
Yep.
Am I citing something that exists, or am I citing something that sounds like it could exist but actually doesn't? So within all this reality, we've got so much in terms of legal court cases and legal precedents and other things that goes into the history books. And most of the research that's done by people now, it takes them so long to do this.
Yeah.
So applying AI actually makes a very good argument for this particular technology. We really does make a lot of sense. It has to be applied, though, in the right way. And obviously, this particular lawyer decided that he thought it was good enough and didn't want to go to the next step of actually checking his sources. So honestly, this would be the same as if I gave a junior employee who'd never done this before the task of finding these types of citations, and then not checking their work afterwards to see if in fact they had done it the right way or had the right citations there. So again, this completely lands on him for not only trusting it but also not checking it himself before he handed his work in. So
yes, to wrap this one up, let me read a quote from the judge who ruled on this. It should go without saying that any use of artificial intelligence must be consistent with counsel's ethical and professional obligations. In other words, the use of artificial intelligence must be accompanied by the application of actual intelligence in its execution.
I can only imagine the judge speaking as a parent to this lawyer as they were saying this.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a great quote.
It is.
Okay, let's move on. The next article, and this gets into workforce trends, workforce dynamics, which I know is a favorite overall topic for you, Michael.
It is.
So this is perfect for you to break down. From The Atlantic, the article is titled, "The Job Market is Frozen." And the tagline beneath it, which is also worth mentioning, says, "Unemployment is low, but workers aren't quitting and businesses aren't hiring." So, Michael, have we transitioned from the great resignation to the great stay put or the great sit and watch? How would you categorize it?
Well, the job market is frozen, but I'm not going to let it go.
You'll let ChatGPT do that for you.
You didn't get the pun there. It's frozen, but I'm not going to let it go.
Oh, okay. Thank
Sorry.
you.
Anyway, I'll move on from that. So obviously that landed very flat. The transition from the great resignation that we had back in the 2021, 2022 time frame, where businesses were scrambling to get any of their positions brought in, and they were hiring at salaries that were much higher than they expected, and people were demanding those salaries and getting them, making their transitions to these new jobs. The market was on fire at that point. Fast forward now, where we have tariffs that are causing issues with the economy, the inflation, which hasn't yet subsided. Companies are in a much more conservative stance when it comes to moving forward. They're not sure where the economy is going. They also see the introduction of new macroeconomic factors, I'll put it that way, causing them to hold back from either trying to expand their businesses or trying to move forward into areas which would require investment. So while there are plenty of job openings that are currently being listed, and the unemployment level, at least here in the United States, where this is kind of identified, is still relatively low on a low scale. The reality is that the employers are being extremely selective when they are choosing someone for an opening that they are posting. The second issue that this article brings up is that employees, at least those that aren't being let go from the federal government in waves, are choosing to stay in their job because they also feel that they can't make the transition elsewhere because they're hearing stories, or maybe they are trying themselves to make the transition to another company and are unable to. So there's a fear from the company side to hire. There's a fear from the employee side to transition anywhere else. And so this gets into a fear gridlock because they're not seeing the optimism, they're seeing the pessimism that's coming out from the macroeconomic factors, whether it's inflation, tariffs, the war, whatever is going on. Things are still in a place of fear. So fear tends to paralyze people, and people are still in charge of companies. People are still looking at their jobs personally. So all of these things are affecting the way that the transition is moving forward with the normal cycle of folks moving on from a position after X number of years and looking for something better, different, whatever. So that's definitely a very strong factor in this. The other part of it too is that they liken this to the this is all American based, liken it to the mortgage issues that people are seeing, where mortgages became really, really low, and there was a lot of transition. People moved all over the place. The housing prices went sky high because people were now having this what we call cheap money with their the mortgage rates. Well, now they're locked in to those very cheap mortgage rates, and they can't move from their houses either, which may be something they would choose to do. Hey, we've been in this house now for 3-4 years, or I refinanced. I didn't even move. I just refinanced when the rates were low. So now there's a lot of, I guess, this, again, concern of lock-in. I'm locked into my house. I really can't move. I'm locked in at my job because I can't see any way out of it. And so you factor all those things together, plus stagflation and all the other things that are going on. There's a general sense of, it's not just frozen, it's paralyzed with fear is what I would look at it.
And the article also points out that historically, when we're in a job market like this and people are hesitant to change or move, then productivity tends to go down, innovation declines, inequality rises. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that can come when the job market is frozen like this. So let me just evangelize a little bit and say that I believe it's a prime opportunity for companies to bring digital co-workers into play via RPA digital workers, or maybe in some cases agentic AI. Just because there's concern about the future economy doesn't mean that companies shouldn't continue to improve the way they operate and make themselves more agile and efficient. So I hope many companies think of it that way and are not, just standing still themselves. But adding digital labor, it can be a powerful lever to drive some big improvement in a time such as this.
The other part to that same concept, the same angle. If you're bringing in digital labor, you can change the culture within your organization. Where from people who are afraid because, hey, listen, I've been in this job for a while and I ultimately would like another challenge or to do something different, but I don't feel like I can have that here. So I'm looking for another role someplace else. Obviously, that's a loss for the company, as much as it is a gain for the employee to go somewhere else and maybe be challenged differently. But in this kind of situation where you have the capabilities to say, well, maybe we can be looking at how we do our work differently by applying digital labor and applying AI in innovative ways, by helping to train and show our employees this new path forward. They may get re-energized, or they should get re-energized. Be able to say like, this is a new way forward. Could be interesting. This could be challenging for me. Staying here and actually changing the way that we work. Maybe I'm changing my own job inside the company for better. So that could re-energize the culture within these companies from one of fear to one of excitement, because, okay, maybe we're not making the same kind of investment in the dollar figure perspective, but I'm making an investment in my employees to help them become more productive. And then they'll feel better about the organization that they are working for, because now they feel an investment from them.
Great point. Okay, Michael, let's move on to the last article from the New York Times. What students are saying about AI and the future of work. So in this article, the author, to prepare for it, surveyed teenagers from a number of high schools and asked the question, are they worried about AI taking over human jobs? What is this putting a damper on the outlook for these young people who have yet, in some cases, even to go into college? So what did they have to say, Michael?
Well, first of all, I love this article. It was is very refreshing to hear from students, and it was students globally. This was not just in one Philadelphia suburb, although there was quite a few from Philadelphia that were listed here. They had some from South Korea, Chicago, and several other places that they were talking through, Pakistan, to really get a better feel for what these students were considering. I love their answers. I thought they were well thought in terms of how they're approaching it. A lot of them had some fear or some questions about how this would affect their moving into college and their choice of what their degree might be in college, because they definitely see an impact that AI either is having or will be expected to have on careers as they start making their choices in college. But there was also some refreshing discussions about, I'm not really sure that this is going to affect everything. It will have some positive effects, but there's so much that humans and people do from a thought process and a relational perspective that we should be able to use these tools that were presented in a really positive way. So while they were concerned, there was some optimism from a few of these students who really spoke well about it. And I thought that was a really good way to approach it. But we've seen this too, and I've talked with other folks on our podcast now about, like, one of them was a college professor, and she was talking about the fact that her college students are seeing this as, instead of being afraid of the technologies that they're going into, to embrace them fully, to allow you to have the capabilities that these technologies bring with them. So it really is a state of mind that how you see these technologies and how you see the future. So from our last article to this one here, it is really about perspective and putting that in perspective. You can choose to see things as glass half empty, or you can choose to see them as glass half full.
Definitely. I'll read one of my favorite statements from a teenager that was featured in the article. This person said, "Human connections are what people live for. If AI takes over without the touch of humanity, life will become very dull, except when you consume mindless media." And I think enough people are aware of this or have enough logical reasoning to come to this conclusion that it won't happen in any future. I mean, many of the responses were pretty deep like that. As you said, I was definitely impressed with them. And I came away from the article feeling more hopeful for young people that are in high school today or even college today. It makes you feel better. It is a matter of perspective. And this is the nature of progress. Things change. I think it's just happening so much faster than it did in the past.
Yes.
So young people have to be more resilient than we were, or our parents or our grandparents and many generations back. But anyway, thank you guys for joining us today on the Pulse Check. It's been a fun discussion. We'll wrap it up. Remember that we post another podcast every week with a great guest, so check that out. And otherwise, we will see you on our next Pulse Check. Bye for now.